Some things to kind of review. First, I thought we would open with how PETS governance just generally works. You still want? Okay. So there's a PET board which is responsible for this conference. They receive proposals for hosting. The proposals are open to the public. Anyone can submit them. The winning bid includes the identities of the general chairs. At the same time, the PET board, with input from the continuing PC chair, selects the next PC chair. So at PETS, we have a model, which I think has worked very successfully, where it's a 2-year term. I don't know if you think it's worked successfully, but it's a 2-year term where you have a senior chair and a junior chair, and the junior chair becomes kind of the senior chair in the next PETS. Anything you want to add to that?
I think that's mostly it.
Okay.
I guess, maybe we should all introduce ourselves.
Yes.
We didn't do that yet.
Speaking of which, Zubair, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Zubair Shafiq. I am going to be the junior chair next year and the senior chair the following year.
And Bailey, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Bailey. I'm the outgoing artifact chair, and unfortunately, neither the continuing artifact chair or the incoming chair can be here in Lausanne with us, but I'll tell you a bit about how artifacts went this year.
And I think at least one of them was planning to be on Zulip to answer questions as well. So, yes, and just as everything else we've been doing today, we're going to be taking questions. After we get through these slides, we're taking questions on Zulip. So please do enter some questions in the town hall topic, stream, whatever you want to call it, channel thing, and we will try to answer them.
Okay. In terms of how PETS operated this year, it was very similar to how PETS operated last year. A typical paper, almost all papers received 3 reviews from PC members and 1 external review. There are some exceptions, for example, for major revisions. We had both regular PC members and senior PC members. Senior PC members kind of are sort of similar to the role of associate editors in that they come in and check for review quality, and they also, for each paper, whether it's accepted or rejected, write a meta review which goes back to the authors. Most papers had the opportunity to enter I don't think we called it rebuttal, an author response, where they could look at an early draft of reviews and had an opportunity to address factual errors. PETS continued the use of the major revision model, meaning that in addition to accept and reject categories, we also had a major revision, which means a paper, I guess technically belongs in the category of rejections. But kind of what you get from a major revision is a meta review, which serves as somewhat of a contract where if you do these following things, some of which might be pretty difficult, and resubmit your paper in the next issue or 2, it should be accepted. And a critical component of the major revision model is that it goes back to the same set of reviewers.
Yep. And indeed, the vast majority of the MR papers that are resubmitted do get accepted in the end. Not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah, I think it's around 3/4, 80%, maybe even higher.
Yeah, it's maybe. Yeah, I think it's 80 or above.
Yeah. Okay. We also attempted to have procedures in place for dealing with ethical issues that do come up, especially in privacy-enhancing technologies. And the goal was to identify these as early as possible because sometimes these can be complicated and require quite a bit of discussion, and we don't want to be making last-minute decisions based on, or last-minute knee-jerk reactions to issues that might come up. So we added in I guess 2022 you added it? Mm-hmm. Okay. In 2022, there was a field where in the hot crap review form where the reviewers could describe any ethical concerns they had about a paper. That was made, a slight tweak that we did this year was make that visible so that the authors could actually see what the ethical concerns were. Michelle and I mostly looked at those, and when we thought it necessary, assigned an ethical, a special ethics reviewer from a volunteer committee where we tried to assign someone who was an expert in the area, whether it was like an IRB concern, for example, or a responsible disclosure concern, or something else, who could actually weigh in. This is kind of it was a non-binding review. It would be factored in with all the others, and ultimately, I guess in 2022, all identified issues were resolved, and in 2023, Michelle and I, mostly Michelle, no, just kidding, we desk rejected one paper due to identified ethical safety concerns. So,
which, without loss of generality, involved testing vulnerabilities on a live system that did not belong to the people who were writing the paper. So please don't do that. For many reasons, many important reasons, more important reasons, but also because you will get your paper rejected from PETS. So please don't do that.
All right, so for artifact review, if you're not familiar with it, once your paper is accepted here at PETS, you receive an invitation to submit the corresponding code or data sets or script or whatever you use to kind of do the science to make the paper. And this year, we once again had a very significant number that were submitted. So we had 61 artifacts submitted across the 4 rounds out of the 123 papers that were submitted to PETS overall, keeping in mind some of those papers are obviously theory papers, and we don't review proofs in the artifact process, which would be what those would have. Most of them have been accepted at this stage. There's only 16 left under review, and they are primarily from the final round, of which we had 21 submissions in that last round. So if you look at the kind of path over time, we have it pretty steady with 14 in the initial 2 rounds, and then 12, and then 21. Just everyone wanted to submit artifacts in the last round, so our reviewers have been working very hard to get these last ones through. Overall, this is up from 51 submissions last year, which is not as crazy of an increase as we've previously been seeing. We're starting to level out. We went from 34 to 51 the previous year, and it was an even higher jump the year before that, so things are going well. To account for the increasing number of artifacts that keep getting submitted, this past year we drastically increased the size of our committee. So last year our committee size was of 24 people on the artifact committee, and it was 13 the year before. This year we had 45 reviewers, and it was very effective in allowing us to do quick, efficient, and quality reviews. In general, if something came up, as it is known to do when you're reviewing actual software artifacts or even papers, it was very easy for us to find an emergency reviewer from our committee, and therefore no one was delayed in trying to get the reviews in and get the information to the authors to update it. Each artifact received at least 2 reviewers, and each reviewer did between 0 and 2 artifacts per round. Some of this was people stepping out for a round, and then it's balanced across the year, so they would just do extras as appropriate. It's a single blind process. Obviously, these are accepted papers. The authors are listed on the PETS website, but we don't tell you who the reviewers are other than they're from the artifact committee. And again, it consists of scripts, source code, data sets. It's a pretty broad thing. You can always just email and ask if you think something could be reviewed as an artifact, and so far we've never had a case where we said no. One thing that's been pretty strong this year, and we did mention briefly at the town hall last year, is some artifacts have some very, very hyper-specific hardware requirements, and finding a reviewer that has that exact intersection of tools has continued to prove difficulty. So going into next year, we're going to, we minus me, because as I said, I'm the outgoing, but Passan, who is your current and continuing chair, and Maximilian, who is going to be your incoming chair, are going to continue forward. They are going to continue to increase the documentation and make clarity of the process to both authors and reviewers. Just in case you didn't know, this past year we drastically moved up the timeline to kind of make things easier for the whole process of camera readies. And so artifact submissions, you're invited as soon as you get your notice of acceptance. It's due 3 weeks after that, and you get your initial reviews 3 weeks after that. And this allows us to get at least most artifacts that are very close to ready to be done before the camera ready and catch any mistakes, but also to have those artifacts done before PETS, and that was pretty successful this year. And so the anticipated finish for any artifact that's getting submitted is it's done by the submission date of the next round of the artifact cycle. So going forward, based on that hardware problem, we mentioned it last year, but we couldn't make too many changes at once. We're going to move towards adding some variation in what the nature of the artifact is. Currently, everything is based on were we able to reproduce it and connect it to the papers, but in particular with these specialized hardware cases, sometimes they're very, very beautifully documented artifacts, but we just simply cannot test them. So including things like artifact available or documented, as well as what is our default. If you see an artifact badge on the program, know they worked very hard and it is reproducible. It was verified by people from the community. But that's not sustainable, especially as we continue to get more intricate artifacts, and so that will be changing going forward. And there's going to be just some more details coming out with respect to tightening deadlines of rounds and clarifying when things have to be finished by. Because artifact review is more of a conversational process, authors have a chance to make updates as reviewers find issues. But once in a while, that goes on a little too long, and so we need to figure out a way to balance this conversation of improving accessibility and reproducibility in the community with having an actual endpoint for this process.
Thanks, Bailey.
Did you want to cover this? Or do you want to? Sure. Okay.
So for PETS 2024 and onwards, we have made some changes, and one of the major changes that we are making is that we have replaced senior PC with a smaller set of vice chairs. And I believe a majority of our vice chairs are here at PETS. If you are around Becca, Ganesh, I thought I saw Paul, and other two vice chairs are Anna and Sadia Froze. And the rationale for moving from senior PCs to vice chairs was, the main motivation was that we wanted to scale this model. One of the main tasks of senior PC was that they were supposed to write meta reviews, which are like really crucial, especially for major revisions, as Micah mentioned. Based on feedback that we have received and our own anecdotal experiences, we decided that starting 2024, the meta review will be written by one of the reviewers of the paper who has actually read the paper and interacted with other reviewers who are reviewing the paper. That can lead to, we hope, like higher quality meta reviews, and that would cause less friction, especially for major revisions. But also it makes it a much more scalable process, especially as PET submissions continue to grow. We'll just have to keep increasing the size of the senior PC in the old model, and that just didn't seem very scalable.
I guess the only thing I would add to that is the vice chair model, so the role is a little bit different. Since there are fewer vice chairs, it really is an associate editor or associate chair role where they're supervising a large set of papers. We roughly split it up evenly. And so one of our main motivations here was as PETS continues to grow and the number of submissions increases, just the role or the amount of work required on the chairs, I think Michelle probably would agree with me, but I'll let her speak to herself, is large, would you? Yeah, okay. And we need a way to better scale that. And that includes things like one-off things or nudging reviewers who are late in their reviews or recommending decisions or dealing with issues, just having kind of another layer of people who really take ownership of the conference so far, we're kind of finishing off the first issue of PETS 24, I thought has been wildly successful. Anything else you want to add? Okay. One other major change is based on feedback that we received on PETS 23 from some PC members. We're really trying to push authors to make their code and data available to others, continuing this theme of reproducibility. Now, there are certainly, with the acknowledgement that there are cases where that just may not be possible, either because you work for an organization, a company that doesn't want to do that, which is a shame, you should really talk to them, or in terms of data, it could be extremely privacy revealing, and there's just no safe way that you could release that data. But by default, kind of our expectation is that the intellectual merit that comes out of a PETS paper should be something that is reproducible. And as part of that, hopefully, through, in addition to artifact review, that the code and data is available. So we make during the submit, we've modified the submission form to include a checkbox where the authors signify that they are going to release their code or data, or if they don't do that, explain their reasons not to. And at the moment, this is hidden from reviewers. This is something that just the the vice chairs and the PC chairs see, but could conceivably be used to evaluate maybe at a later point. Anything else?
Yeah, just want to add here that I think as was previously mentioned, this is essentially a soft nudge to authors to think about artifact review, although that's a separate process, not considered part of the peer review process. Once this happens, we expect the number of artifact submissions might go up. And the other thing we want feedback from you guys is we are thinking of actually strengthening this language for the next year, 2025. So this is where we want your feedback. Do you think like some of this information should be directly available to reviewers as they are reviewing the paper in the first place? So essentially, we're going to end up fusing some aspects of artifact review and some aspects of paper review. So if you have strong thoughts about this or suggestions, please feel free to chime in.
Okay, perhaps one of the more controversial things that we're doing for PETS 24 is we're trying to decrease the number of external reviewers, and we're trying to do this for a few reasons. Just as a little bit of background, we typically have 1 out of 4 reviews written by external reviewers. It is, in my opinion, extremely difficult to find external reviewers and to recruit them. We do have a nomination form, which we encourage everybody to look at and nominate folks who you think might be great. But determining the fit, I would say, is one of the hardest jobs as a PC chair, at least in my experience for the past year. It is incredibly time-consuming because for every paper, that means looking at the external reviewer, looking at their CV if it's online or their website, and asking the question, is this person really well-suited for this paper, and then inviting them, and then maybe hearing back from them. And there's also some issues with HutCrap, which I think is an overall wonderful system. Its support for external reviewers is lacking in a few ways, which makes it the bookkeeping especially difficult. There's also, I think it's generally true that PC members have kind of more of a ownership of the conference. I don't want to overgeneralize. There are wonderful external reviewers who have written extremely high-quality reviews, but that's not necessarily always the case. So something that Zubair and I have discussed, and we are at least implementing this for the first issue of PETS 24, is to really decrease the number of external reviewers and use them only sporadically, in particular in cases where we feel that there's no PC member who has the requisite expertise, or there's just little expertise amongst the PC, which by the way can indicate that maybe it's not a great fit for PETS, but also might indicate that we just have a gap in experience and specialties among the PC. The disadvantage of this is obviously if you take away a quarter of the reviews, we need to make up for that. We're not trying to decrease the number of reviews per paper. We don't want to do that, which means that there is a higher cost or higher number of reviews per PC, and we're just trying to manage that as best as we can with the size of the PC. More concerning to me is one of the things that that Michelle and I did, and Zubair and I did when we're forming these PCs, is to figure out who should be on the PC, and taking a look at the external reviewers who did a wonderful job, and then inviting them onto the PC when appropriate. And that is, in my opinion, a great method for getting junior researchers, PhD students, postdocs, new assistant professors involved in the PC. We don't want to lose that, or at least we don't want to lose that that flow, and so we are still very much soliciting potential external reviewers, but also potential PC members through the nomination form, which I should mention is available on the PETS website. Anything you want to? Okay. So that's kind of it for the prepared things that we had. There are a number of discussion points where we all thought that we could use your input. I guess I can just take these in order. Also, should we do this or questions? Are we getting questions?
No questions so far.
No questions so far. Okay, you're forcing me into doing this. Okay. Okay.
Oops, just got one.
Just got one. All right, while you
Yes.
should I?
Yes. So, well, up to you. Do you want to do this or you want to do that?
All right, why don't we do the first discussion point and I'll go back to the question.
That's fine.
Okay. So I talked briefly before about the ethics process. I've received kind of a few pieces of feedback from this, some positive, a few negative. It's somewhat purposefully ad hoc, meaning that we have an ethics committee, or really the people who filled out the I know something about ethics form. These are PC members who the chairs email and say, hey, we have ethical issues come up. Are you interested in doing ethics reviews? And a lot of people say yes, and we ask them what their areas of expertise are. So then when something comes up, which means that any PC member has indicated through their review form that there's an ethical issue that they're concerned about, the chairs will determine whether or not it warrants an external review. If it's a question like, did the authors get IRB approval for something that clearly needed IRB approval, we don't really need an expert to come in, right? We just need to ask the authors, did you get this or not, and if not, why? But a lot of the times for more complicated issues, we do bring in a separate ethics reviewer. What we don't have is we don't have a list of do's and do nots. And we've been kind of purposeful about that. There are pros and cons. The disadvantage of not having that is obviously that it's impossible for authors to know what is good and bad just by looking at the PETS website. What we've been relying on is what we feel are community norms. And by what we feel, that's kind of up to whoever the assigned external reviewer is. So there's a lot of subjectivity, I think, that comes into this. The advantage of doing it this way is that if we were to attempt to come up with a list of thou shalls and thou shall nots, it's going to be non-comprehensive. And I think constructing such a list of bad things you can do in research might be a really fun, entertaining way to spend a week. But we'll still find someone who does something that we haven't come up with. My experience from being on PCs of other conferences is that we're not an outlier, and this is actually the fact that we have an ethics committee makes us somewhat of an outlier. A lot of the times it's just kind of the whims of the PC chairs or the reviewers. I think this is a big issue that's much broader and bigger than PETS, but it's one that I think, based on the subject matter that we're all engaged with, comes up, I would argue, more frequently in this community than in others, with potentially more ramifications. So this is a discussion point, and I've just rambled on for 5 minutes, but I guess we discussed through Zulip. So if you have any comments, we have it.
How would people discuss if they don't have a mic?
That's a good point. How are they going to discuss? Yeah.
Should we go around?
Yeah, can we just go around? Or?
I mean, we can, or you can put your comments in Zulip and we can read them, whatever you think. I mean, I don't want to disadvantage the online folks too much here, but we can also pass the mic around.
But if we pass the mic, they should be able to hear, right?
Yes, they should be able to hear, but we also want to give them a chance to ask questions if they have some.
Start with online questions.
Okay, so we have 2 questions so far. The first is regarding the stronger language about code and data submissions. One thing I worry about is authors feeling pressured to release some sort of data to get the paper in, and therefore publishing data irresponsibly. For example, publishing survey data that has not been properly anonymized, or publishing interview transcripts. Maybe it would be good to have clear guidelines as to what types of data can or should be released.
Generally, I think I agree. Yeah, we need to have clearer guidelines about what should, or about like proper anonymizations and authorizations before the data is released. But I think there are different ways we can tackle this. One thing that I can think top of my head is we can initially release data, but in a limited fashion, only with the reviewers, so they can actually evaluate it. Technically, it is still not public. If it is only shared with the reviewers, that could be one approach to making sure that the data is properly anonymized. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, we could also differentiate, or we could have authors commit to releasing the data in code by not at submission time, but at camera ready, and then enforce that they actually followed up with that, and that might release some of the time pressure as we're on overleaf 5 minutes before the deadline, getting ready to submit our papers, to do a poor job of protecting people's privacy and just releasing data without thinking about it.
Just a note on that, as the deadline for camera ready, probably want the deadline for acceptance, because as we found with artifact review, sometimes we actually find mistakes and then we can give the authors a chance to fix it.
It's a great, yes. And clearly we should talk to our artifact chairs before implementing any of these things.
To me, an interactive author response model seems extremely stressful for like everyone involved, like the chairs, the authors, and the reviewers. And given that we have shepherding and revision options, like I'm not sure it's a problem that we would have. Like it seems like a solution in search of a problem that would just add stress to everybody, but I'm open to hearing other perspectives.
Anyone who disagrees with this?
So for those online, Leo strongly seconded that because he's had a lot of very stressed out students dealing with interactive response periods.
I'll just throw in something slightly controversial then, I think. I think from the side of being on the PC, it's sometimes very helpful to be able to ask a few quick clarifying questions that would then let me push a paper towards a more positive outcome. And I realize that it's not always nice, right? Also being on the PC thinking about this takes more time and effort, but being able to push for something positive, I find nice.
Yeah, just to briefly respond to that. So the reason that this is up there, it's my fault that point 4 is not point 4. That this fourth bullet point is up there. Is that there have been cases where, especially I think in the more theory-oriented papers, where there really needs to be a back and forth. Why is this the case? Oh, it's because of this. I disagree. And really back and forth when we're talking about factual things. That's been mediated by the chairs previously, and maybe that's the right model. Maybe that this is such an exceptional case that it's the chairs who can just be the anonymous remailer here. But the thinking is that this an optional interactive author response model would at least help for those cases. But if we're harming 90% of the community by helping 2%, then that's probably something to think about. Okay, so the question is it optional? Isn't it always optional, though?
Yeah, like optional is not doesn't feel optional.
I mean, the rebuttal now is optional. You know, authors don't have to rebut. They do, and I've seen reviewer discussions that were like, the authors don't care about their paper anymore because they haven't responded, which isn't great.
Yeah, and in practice, not responding is seen as an indicator that you are not, that you don't disagree with whatever the negative comments are in the review, right? So, which for better or for worse, I think that would be hard to fix because that's just a very human response, right? Oh, I think.
To a newbie, can you explain what this model is, and in particular, is the communication initiated by the author or by the reviewer?
Sure. So where I've seen it, and Oakland, for example, has this model now. It's done through the comment system on the submission system. So it could work either way. Either the authors have the opportunity to initiate the discussion or a PC member. And it's doing it through the submission system preserves double blindness.
Hello. Oh, goodness. I broke it. Well, my comment was about about publishing guidelines for the ethics process. I don't really see any downside to publishing some exemplars. I mean, Michelle commented to one already earlier in this session, and I think it's helpful for people to have a sense of, I mean, if this is going to get your paper desk rejected, I don't think that should be a secret. I also think that, like some of the other things, the artifact submission being an example, you know, these are all opportunities to prompt reflection, right? Where if people see, like, some things that could raise, you know, ethical concerns, or maybe it's examples from past papers or something like that, or even things that we've seen in other conferences that feel applicable. I think it can be a good moment for potential submitters to say, oh, should I be doing that? Should we be doing that? I mean, I know that I had an example of something I was reviewing internally for an internal process not long ago where it was an obvious ethical problem to me, and it was someone, in this case, coming from another discipline where they were like, we do this all the time, NBD, and then 6 months ago, I saw a paper published in that discipline about why it was a problem, an ethical problem, right? So sometimes, you know, I think it's a chance to flag, and I think just as we have kind of, you know, descriptive but non-exhaustive lists of these are things that might be PETS papers, you know, it's fine to have a descriptive but non-exhaustive list of things that are ethical concerns, especially, like it was mentioned in the AMA, like a lot of times I think for people doing human subjects work, this idea that something like passes an IRB is I'm in the clear and don't need to worry about anything, and I think that for a lot of us that's not so straightforward. And so I think particularly in those instances, it's useful to sort of say, hey, you know, if you're working with human subjects, IRB is generally expected except under A, B, and C conditions, but also that isn't necessarily like carte blanche, like because your IRB says this isn't human subjects, that it might not raise ethical concerns. So I think just if it's something that we're considering not accepting papers on the basis of, it's important to give people some guidance as to what could fall into that category.
I think that's a really excellent point. Thank you. I guess I'd suggest to folks, if you have examples of kind of this, you know, if there are other conferences that you know of that already do this, just so we're not starting from scratch if we decide to do this, if you could send that to Zubair and I, to me, that would be really helpful.
I started writing up some high-level guidelines like 2 years ago that were supposed to be published for PETS, and as you can see, that, you know, didn't quite make it. Because I was doing a few other things at the time, but yeah, I think it's going to be very hard to make like very specific hard and fast rules. But I think examples of situations to watch out for, or types of things to be concerned about, could be quite helpful.
Yeah, just on the ethics point, I think I would like to reiterate the idea of having something more than just the principles, because right now it says go look at the Menlo report, which is good because, you know, it gives you the principles, but you don't really know how the how the PETS ethics committee is going to interpret the principles. So like a baseline of like, oh, this is what we actually consider something like this. Maybe using examples saying, oh, this actually doesn't meet the principle as well as we see it. Just to make it clear that like, oh, we don't just need you to have said that you've thought about the principles. And also on the interactive author response model, I think there is maybe something to be said for having something other than the current rebuttal model, because where you've got a mix of reviewers' responses, it can be difficult if you want to address someone's small concern or points of information versus someone really took issue with your paper and wants to say something long and complicated about it. Authors, especially students, have to really agonize over how to phrase what they want to say to avoid antagonizing the reviewers. If you've got a lot of things that you want to say that are small alongside some rebuttal where you're trying to push back against maybe a reviewer who's not being very charitable, you have to pick your battles. And I don't know if necessarily a direct interactive response model is the right way, but having a one monolithic, single, one-shot response is really stressful.
So I would absolutely tend to agree. I think one of the things that I found very challenging over the past year is getting PC members to actually respond to the rebuttals, which to me means a lot of the times it's unfortunately not read. I know that students and authors just spend a lot of time working on how do I fit all of my response into 500 words, or attach a PDF that's 15 pages long and have us yell at them. And it's discouraging when you don't see kind of an updated review to kind of reflect that response. And so
to be fair, I think they do get read a lot. It's harder to get people to indicate in their review that they read it. So I don't think it's that they aren't being read, but of course, as an author, the two things are not distinguishable, right? Whether it was read, but you don't see the response versus not being read. But so I don't want to give the impression that nobody's reading these things, because I don't think that's true in most of the cases. But it can be difficult to get people to, write something down after having read it. Should we take one from here? Okay. Are we planning to stick with online and recorded talks? And if we do, can we schedule them in their own sessions? Because I have a feeling I'm missing great on-site presentations, because I'm sitting in a session where suddenly a presentation is just a pre-recording without interaction. So I think this is a really big challenge in a lot of different ways. So for the talks that are remote this week, we had one which is remote because the presenter had COVID concerns, and every single other case that I'm aware of was due to visa problems of trying to get here. And so mandating, that everybody come in person will result in a lot of cases the first author not being able to present the paper, because we just, we can't resolve this visa thing, right? Like, we have a lot of folks who are in the US and can't leave. We have other folks who can't go to the US, right? So there's no place we can have the conference where we aren't going to have these problems. So if we stop allowing the remote presentations at all, that's going to result in a bunch of first authors and students who aren't able to present. At the same time, I totally agree that especially the pre-recorded videos, we did try very hard to get our remote presenters to present live, but even a live remote recording is better than a video, but is still not nearly as nice as having an in-person talk. We could try to move them to their own sessions, perhaps, although based on our experience this year, we really didn't know when we were making the schedule which ones were going to be remote, and I'm not sure we could have found out much earlier. Some people were still waiting on visa situations. We've even had people switch in one direction or the other in the last week or two. So we could try, but I don't think we could with 100%. And I'm saying we, but it's not going to be my problem anymore after Thursday. But I think it would be hard with 100% confidence to get that set up. Yeah, I don't know what a good solution to this problem is, but I'm open to suggestions.
Based on my experience of live remote talks, I think they went really well. The interaction, the Q&A was actually as good, if not better, as compared to in-person presenters. So, but if you strongly disagree, please feel free to suggest otherwise.
We have a couple more here, or if somebody in the room. I guess another one from here is, can we give the technical talks more time again? This PETS is great, but I enjoy learning more during the talks rather than just elevator pitches for papers that I can read after the conference. Yeah, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. We could certainly accept fewer papers, but in all seriousness, it's hard. Given the time constraints, the number of days that people are willing to travel, people have families and other things that are keeping them from traveling. I think it's, and we're growing. We could also expand this with more tracks, with just make PETs larger and bigger, but at some point, there are pluses and minuses to growing something that large. Yeah, Zubair,
I do think eventually the decision will be to have more tracks, because I assume we cannot extend the duration of the conference for various reasons. So then the trade-off is you may miss some of the talks because you're interested in talks across multiple sessions. Another model that I've seen some other conferences adopt that we can consider discussing is not all accepted papers have to be presented. It also has its own set of challenges and issues. That is one way to have fewer talks, but longer talks in depth. So if you have any experience or strong opinions about that, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I think one of the points is that at the moment, at this PET, many things are great, but I think we only have 2 technical sessions per day, right? And there would be maybe time for more. And then maybe we could have a little bit of less stress for each of the speakers so that they have more than 10 or 12 minutes. Because, I mean, also the AMA is great and the birds of the feathers are important. I think that you're doing a great job with regards to getting the community back together and so on. But maybe next PETs we can have 3 sessions, technical sessions per day, and then like 15 or 17 minutes for presentations. That would already be good.
I think that's something we can definitely look at.
So my question pertains to the artifact evaluation process. So other venues, specifically Usenix, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with to some degree, has a very rigorous artifact evaluation process. So you have to submit an appendix that outlines the hardware requirements, software, the expected results, what each claim is being verified by the artifact, and how to achieve that. Is something like that intended or planned to be adopted by PETs in the future to make artifact evaluation more consistent for reproducing work?
So currently, every artifact accepted at PETs has been verified to do what it says it's going to do and reproduce things in the paper, or say like the requirements to use the artifact to do it. Because some of the artifacts obviously take weeks to run. Going forward, well, not me, but we are continuing to increase kind of the level of information being provided to the authors in terms of expectations as well as to the reviewers, including having something similar to Usenix, like what I mentioned with having distinctions between artifacts that simply we can only verify are available and documented. But, and I can't speak for the incoming and continuing chairs and open to feedback. I don't know that it would want to go to the same level of detail of Usenix, in the sense that a lot of it is results in for the authors a lot of trying to check boxes, whereas in our current process, it's a very communicative process where we see whether or not the reviewers can actually produce what the authors did themselves from the start to the finish. And that idea of just giving to someone who has no context and seeing if there's enough information to produce it kind of captures that information already, because if that information's not there, I'm not going to be able to take your artifact and have any idea what to do with it.
So yesterday we had the FOCI co-location workshop, And I guess this is a question for the audience. We're going to try that experiment again next year at PETS and FOCI together. Did it work? Did it not work? Is there a way to make it better? If you have feedback on that, tell somebody from the PETS world or the PETS chairs or the FOCI chairs what you think and how to make it better. And the chairs up there are welcome to provide feedback too.
All right, here's an interesting one. Does anyone have views on sponsorship? We currently accept some sponsors, but turn down other sponsors due to the sponsor having certain types of ethically questionable business practices. And so should we be more strict or less strict? We would certainly never, regardless, accept any sponsors who would, set requirements on the conference, right? Sponsors would in no case be able to dictate anything about the content of the conference. But, in the past, I think the agreement on the PET board was to not make a thing out of the things that we declined. But so without loss of generality, we have declined offers of sponsorship in the past. And you can see the accepted sponsors were highlighted in the intro this morning.
I think it's worth discussing what the sponsors do in terms of sponsoring.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the sponsor money, somebody correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe for the most part, the sponsor money goes almost directly towards travel stipends. I think not much else. Susan, is that? Yeah, I guess it goes to the conference. Money is fungible, right? So it goes towards, the things that so we spend a lot of money on stipends, but obviously also we spend money on, renting facilities and buying food and all the normal conference things.
Yeah, it's about artifact evaluation. I saw there were 4 rejections. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of curious what kind of problems, why do people get an artifact rejected, and is there any implication? Does it say anything maybe about the results of the paper that were not properly done? What's the follow-up on that?
So in general, there are 3 ways an artifact could be rejected. One is it's not an artifact. It's not something we can possibly evaluate, which has occurred. In theory, it could happen that it's just completely incorrect. That hasn't happened, so good news. The most common case is, for whatever reason, the authors either stop communicating with us or just stop updating the artifact in a state where it's not currently working, or like it could work, but we're not able to execute it and verify that. And I don't think that's generally happening as a result of it just not being possible to make it work. I think it is that a lot of the time the people updating the artifacts and communicating with us are master's students or undergrad students or people doing internships who eventually leave that role and just no longer have the time to spend on that. So that's part of another reason why we're trying to more clearly convey the timelines and tighten them up a bit.
I mean, there's some responses to some of the other comments that we've had, but I can pick some. How are we doing on time? Okay. Let's see. There's a bunch of additional responses and questions about ethics, to which I'm going to say, come to the BOF that Luyo is running at 5 o'clock, so we can talk about these things more. Mm-hmm. And we have some more discussion of the artifact process and also the camera ready process and how to make these things smoother for people, which I think everybody wants to make these things smoother. I think it's just, remembering that everybody doing this are volunteers who put just a huge amount of time and effort into this process. And so getting some of these things to make it smoother up and running is just sometimes difficult, but not, but I think everyone is trying to think of ways to improve these things. Rachel.
Can you press the button?
The effort that everyone's put into the publication model change and making that work. During the opening remarks, it was mentioned that we are now indexed by Google Scholar again, which is good, But I believe that's the case for the papers, but it's not the case for the symposium/journal itself. And I know that this occasionally has like not in a huge problem for me because I'm at a stage in my career where it doesn't matter that much, but like NYU like cares about for people outside of our area if like we're listed in the top 20 for conferences in your area or whatever, and looks at the median, you know, bean counting things, and we can have a discussion about whether they should or not, but they do, and we don't exist in that space. So if that's something we could potentially try and change, that would be great.
So to the best of my knowledge, which is not super recent, but the last time we talked about this, I think, there is some process by which you like send a message to some form on Google to ask them to fix it, and then hope that eventually something happens. And I believe we have tried this a couple of times, and so far nothing has happened. So I don't think we understand why it's not currently listed or how to fix it, but that being said, you know, it may be time to try pushing the magic button again and hoping that, you know, we get a different outcome this time. So, and see if we can figure out, you know, we'll try again to try and sort out the problem. But I agree, it is definitely something that would be nice to fix. Yeah, I think that's one of those other things that just, you know, we just have a limited amount of bandwidth to handle all of the various things that happen. But thanks for the poke to keep looking at it.